Imagine this. It's the middle of the night, around 2 a.m. You're standing alone on a deserted cemetery road. The fog is so thick that you can barely see a few feet ahead of you, and there's no one else in sight. Suddenly, you see a bus approaching from the distance. You have no choice but to get on it because it's the last bus of the night and your only way home. Normally, anyone would get on without a second thought, right? But how would you feel knowing that this bus isn't going to take you home? Instead, it's going to take you somewhere far more terrifying, a place where your soul would tremble in fear. This story is about a bus that may seem like any ordinary bus, but it holds a chilling secret that no one has ever been able to solve. It's the biggest mysterious horror story. But before we dive into it, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more horror, mysterious stories. So, as I was saying, this story is from China. There is a bus route in China, numbered 375, that runs from Yuan to Fragrant Hills. It's a short distance, only about 16 kilometers, and the bus usually takes late-night workers home. On the night of November 14th, 1995, at around midnight, this bus was on its usual route. At a stop near the Summer Palace, the bus picked up 4 passengers, a couple, an old woman, and a young man around 22 years old. At that time, there were only 2 other people on the bus, a driver and a conductor. The couple sat behind the driver, while the old woman and the young man took seats opposite each other. The fog outside was so thick that visibility was almost zero. The driver was struggling to see the road, so he asked the passengers if they should take an alternate route. The old woman and the young man agreed, but the couple insisted they stick to the original path, claiming they were only a few minutes from their stop. As the bus continued on its route, the couple got off at their stop, leaving just 4 people on the bus. The road ahead was dark and silent, like a path through a dense forest. The silence was so intense that the only sound was the bus engine. The old woman was staring out the window, trying to pass the time, when suddenly, the driver slammed on the brakes. The young man was shocked and asked the driver why he stopped in the middle of nowhere. The driver pointed ahead and said there were 3 people standing in the middle of the road, signaling for the bus to stop. These 3 people boarded the bus, and as soon as they did, everyone inside was terrified. They were dressed in ancient, tattered clothes, like something out of the royal era, covered in dirt as if they hadn't been washed in years. The person in the middle appeared to be so drunk that he needed support from the other 2. But something was off. Why were they dressed like that? The old woman felt increasingly uneasy. She whispered to the conductor that something was wrong with these 3 people. The conductor tried to brush it off, saying they probably came from a nearby theater after a performance. But the old woman wasn't convinced. Why didn't these people explain themselves? And why was the middle person's face hidden under his hair? As the bus continued, the old woman couldn't shake her fear. She kept a close eye on the 3 newcomers, and her anxiety grew as they neared their destination. Suddenly, she noticed something horrifying. When a gust of wind blew through the bus, it revealed that the person in the middle had no face, just a blank space where a face should be. Not only that, but when she looked down, she saw that none of them had feet. They were floating above the ground. Terrified, the old woman knew they had to get off the bus before it was too late. She created a scene, accusing the young man of stealing her purse. The commotion led the conductor and driver to suggest they both get off the bus to resolve the issue at the nearby police station. The young man, confused and scared, had no choice but to comply. As they got off the bus, the young man asked the old woman why she had accused him. She calmly explained that she had saved his life. She revealed what she had seen, the faceless ghost and the floating feet. She explained that by causing a scene, she managed to get them both off the bus before they became the next victims of whatever evil those 3 ghosts were. The young man, shaken, thanked the old woman for saving him. They decided to report the incident to the police, hoping to save the bus driver and conductor. However, as is often the case with horror stories, the police didn't take them seriously. The next day, the police received reports that the bus, which was supposed to have reached its destination the night before, had never arrived. Alarmed, the police began searching for the missing bus. They reviewed the CCTV footage from the area where the old woman and the young man had gotten off and found something chilling. The bus was captured on camera only until that point. After that, it simply vanished. It wasn't until the following day that the bus was finally found. It had somehow ended up submerged in a river 100 kilometers away from its route. The mystery of what happened to that bus and its passengers remains unsolved to this day. It was early September when I finally booked a stay aboard the RMS Queen Mary, the legendary ocean liner turned hotel docked in Long Beach, California. I'd always been fascinated by the ship's history, its grand voyages, its service as a troop ship during World War II, and of course the countless tales of ghosts and unexplained phenomena that surrounded it. As someone who was both skeptical and intrigued by the paranormal, I couldn't resist the chance to spend a night aboard what many called the most haunted ship in the world. I arrived in the late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows over the ship's weathered decks. The Queen Mary loomed above me, an imposing figure of steel and history. The staff welcomed me aboard with the usual spiel about the ship's storied past and its transformation into a luxury hotel. But as I checked in, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something far more mysterious than a simple historical landmark. I was assigned a room in the lower decks, a section known for its eerie occurrences. The hallways were narrow, the lighting dim, and the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and salt water. My room was small but comfortable, with a porthole that offered a view of the harbor. The bed was neatly made, the furniture all vintage, as if time had stopped decades ago. After settling in, I decided to explore the ship. As I walked the length of the Queen Mary, I couldn't help but notice how quiet it was. The usual sounds of a hotel, muffled conversations, distant footsteps, were strangely absent. Instead, there was a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the ship as it gently swayed in the water. I made my way to the ship's famous swimming pool, an area notorious for its ghost sightings. The pool, long since drained, was eerily lit by old, flickering lights. The atmosphere was oppressive, the air thick with the scent of mildew and chlorine. As I stood by the edge, I imagined the days when the pool would have been filled with passengers, laughing and splashing in the water. But now, it was just a hollow shell, echoing with the whispers of the past. Suddenly, I heard the faint sound of splashing water. I froze, listening intently. It was unmistakable. The distinct sound of someone swimming despite the empty pool. My heart raced as I peered into the shadows, but there was nothing there. Just the stillness of the air and the lingering sound of water that shouldn't have been. Shaken, I decided to return to my room. The corridors seemed longer, more twisted, as if the ship itself was shifting around me. When I finally reached my door, I fumbled with the key, my hands trembling. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, trying to shake off the unease that clung to me like a cold sweat. That night, sleep was elusive. The room felt unnaturally cold, the air thick and heavy. I pulled the blankets tighter around me, but the chill seemed to seep into my bones. Just as I was about to drift off, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic knocking sound. It was coming from the wall behind the bed, a steady, deliberate pattern. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound continued, unwavering. I pressed my ear to the wall, trying to determine the source, but it seemed to be coming from within the ship itself, deep in the structure. Suddenly the knocking stopped, replaced by a low, mournful wail, like the wind howling through a tunnel. But this was no ordinary wind. It carried with it a deep sense of sorrow and despair. I lay back down, trying to convince myself it was just the ship settling, or perhaps a distant pipe groaning in the night. But then, the temperature in the room dropped even further, and I saw it. A mist slowly creeping out from the corners of the room, curling around the bed like tendrils of smoke. I stared in disbelief as the mist coalesced into a faint, human-like shape at the foot of my bed. The figure was translucent, its features barely discernible, but there was no mistaking the presence that filled the room. It was as if time itself had warped, and I was staring into the past, at someone who had been lost to the ship's endless corridors long ago. The figure began to move closer, its form flickering in and out of focus. My breath caught in my throat as it reached out, a hand stretching toward me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. The air was heavy with the scent of sea salt and something else, something metallic, like blood. Just as the figure was about to touch me, a loud metallic clang echoed through the room, like the sound of a heavy door slamming shut. The figure recoiled, dissolving back into the mist, which quickly dissipated into the corners of the room. The air warmed slightly, the oppressive atmosphere lifting, but I was left shaken, my heart racing. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Instead, I sat in the chair by the porthole, watching the harbor lights twinkle in the distance, trying to make sense of what I had just experienced. By the time dawn broke, I had already packed my things, eager to leave the Queen Mary and its haunted history behind. As I checked out, the clerk asked if I had enjoyed my stay. I hesitated, then nodded, forcing a smile. But as I walked down the gangway and back onto solid ground, I knew I would never forget that night on the Queen Mary. The night I came face to face with the ship's restless spirits, forever trapped between the past and the present. And even now, whenever I see the ship from afar, I can't help but feel that something, or someone, is still watching, waiting for the next unsuspecting guest to step aboard.